So that story of separate is a collective story, right? It's a story of kind of like what we're all telling each other, yeah? But there's individual stories too. And that's what the main focus of this talk is going to be about, taking you individually on the stories that you create about yourself, about the world, about time, and what they end up doing to you, the limits that they cause. So let's look at some individual stories. And these are going to help you break through some of your biggest limits. So your core story. Mark Goffney, a friend and mentor of mine, talks about your core sentence. Right? This is something that happens to us when we're very, very young, and we end up living into it for the rest of our lives unless we challenge it, unless we write a new story for ourselves. So I want you to imagine a baby. I want you to see a baby and it's completely taken care of. Right? Every time it cries, it gets fed. Every time it's messed, it gets cleaned. Every time it's scared, it gets attention. Until one day it doesn't. It actually doesn't get the attention that it needed. And in that moment, there's a real panic in the baby, right? The universe, the all-powerful food, shelter, love, everything, this amorphous other, didn't come for some reason. Mom was busy at the sink doing dishes, right? Was on the phone, didn't hear the crying, whatever it was. There's a first time where the universe becomes completely unsafe and we don't get stuff. So what happens is we make meaning out of that, all right? That first hurt leads to a meaning for us. And it leads to meanings like, maybe I don't deserve love. Maybe she didn't come because I don't deserve her to come. Maybe I'm too much. Maybe I'm too loud. Maybe there's something wrong with me in that way. Maybe just nobody loves me. Maybe love isn't a real thing. Maybe the world is dangerous. Maybe, and this is my personal favorite, the one that I kind of ascribe to, is I'm not enough. Maybe I'm not enough. Maybe I'm not enough to be loved, cared for, etc. And so what happens, we grow up continually. This actually makes us safe in that moment. It explains the stress that we've been through. So when it explains the stress, it becomes a core story for us. It becomes a core truth that we bury down and just live into. You know what? I'm not enough, so I'm going to be let down. Maybe not all the time, but then every time I see myself getting let down, it just reinforces this story. I'm not enough, right? I'm not enough. Of course she didn't want to go out with me. I'm not enough. Of course they didn't want to hang out or bring me to their party. I'm not enough. So we end up having this base lens that we're seeing the whole world through ongoingly. And it shows itself in all kinds of other perspectives, right? We don't just see the world through our own perspective. We see it through the perspective of money, perspective of time. We end up, not enough shows up everywhere. Not enough time. I don't have enough money. I'm not popular enough. I'm not good looking enough. I'm not funny enough. My car is not cool enough. I don't live in the right place. I'm not where I'm supposed to be. There's a fundamental flaw in this. So I want to iterate again that truth made us feel safe. So if we grow up in a chaotic environment, we explain things as though they're chaotic, right? In our core kind of understanding of things. And we will actually create chaos for ourselves later in life so that we can feel that comfort again, that explanation of how the world makes sense to us. So it's like the classic example of self-sabotage. It's the classic example of, oh, I've done it again. I've quit again right at that time. I've let myself down again right at when I got to where it was going to be a breakthrough. Nah, that's not for me because I'm not really good enough. Right? How many of you have started software projects only to right toward the end go, I don't really like that niche. Let me start over here. Oh, a couple hands. Right? So this is what we're doing. And yet we don't see it because we're not aware. We haven't turned our consciousness, our lens, our awareness onto this perception that we're carrying. So we live into our story. That's what we're doing. And I want to invite you now from that few examples, if any of those feel true to you, if I'm not enough, or I'm not lovable, or I don't deserve success, or any of those things, if you can identify your own, if you can start to kind of get a glimmer of what it might be, that awareness, right? Just the light of your awareness of it takes away some of the power. It's no longer just in the dark, kind of having its all-powerful effect on you. You start to be able to challenge it and go, well, maybe that's just a belief, or maybe that's not right, or whatever. So I want to invite you right now to think about, for just a second, what is your core story? What is your core limit that you're carrying with yourself? And if you find it, write it down. So there's other stories. How does this express later, right? How does this express out in our life when we're suffering from that, okay, when that's going on for us? I want to talk about the story of fear. I have a brilliant client, incredibly talented, really beautiful woman, really good, long history in the startup community, amazing person. And she is afraid of selling, hugely afraid of selling. Now, why would she be afraid of selling? Let's think about what a sale involves, right? Number one, I have to imagine something good enough to be worthy to sell, right? That's hard and scary. Then I got to actually initiate the call. Well, I don't want to do that. That's horrible. Even if, in the example of my client, once we overcame those things, then she'd initiate calls fine, but she didn't have the courage to close, right? She would never ask. She'd be like, well, I'm doing tons of sales calls. And I was like, well, record one of them and send them to me. And I go, you never made an offer. You never actually said, would you like to buy anything? There was no sales call there. It was a nice connection call, right? And then there's the fear of, what if I actually get the business? I'm already overwhelmed. I might not be able to deliver on that, right? They might not like me. They might think I'm pushy. They might think I'm that smarmy, annoying sales guy. Fear of selling is not one thing. It's an amalgamation of like 8 million different fears and places where you can fall down. And so you begin to address that, and you're now making calls, but then it feels really bad to ask for it at the end, right? Well, I want to break down what some of those fears are. Part of it is this core fear of failure, all right? And fear of failure looks like I might get rejected. Rejection in tribal times for us, right, back in our millions of years ago days, if we got rejected by the tribe, it meant death, right? Getting rejected from a sales call is potentially like a death for us. It's a major, major fear. Well, I might look smarmy. I don't want to be that guy. We all hate that cheesy car salesman guy. I don't want to be that dude. People might not like me, right? And then we have this fear of failing financially, which pushes us toward the sale, right? Like, I got to make the money, so I'm totally afraid of this money thing, so I'm anxious about that. I better go get doing the sale, but I hate doing the sale, so let me just not do that. I'm going to procrastinate, but oh my God, I need money. And it's like we're a ping pong ball getting beat up between these different fears. Fear to start the call, fear to ask for the close. And then when you beat all these, you get to fear of success, which most people go, that's ridiculous. Who fears success? We all want success, but that's not really the case, because we have these buckets of what is okay for us to live in. We have these stories of how successful I'm supposed to be, how much money I'm supposed to be capable of making, how much I can have, what I deserve. So fear of success looks like I'm already overwhelmed, right? If I get more sales, it's going to be more work to do, and I don't want that life. That's crazy. Maybe I won't be able to deliver. I've done all this sales stuff, but maybe what I'm selling actually isn't really worth it. And if I have this, there's going to be some loss of freedom, loss of control. I won't be able to control all this stuff, right? And then what my client, who's brilliant and amazing, she had 2 kinds of base stories, at least. She had the not good enough, but she also had one that is the world isn't safe. Her parents had borderline personality issues, and so lots of times they wouldn't show up for her. They would kick her out of the car. They would do all these horrible things. And so she couldn't trust the people that were supposed to be the most trustable. So what does that end up in a story is the world isn't safe. The world itself is not trustable, right? So for her, one of the breakthroughs that we had to get to was she wouldn't want to close because even if she got the business, that client might wildly let her down. They might one day point at her and embarrass her. They might call her out. They might sue her, whatever, because there was this baseline lack of trust. Her story about what was real in the world was incredibly scary. And yet, as an employee, not as an entrepreneur, not having to do sales calls, incredibly effective across all these areas of life, right? I'll have some clients come up to me and they're very sure they don't need coaching because 90% of their life is amazing, but they just have this one block, right? These stories come up in really weird, down low kind of places. and they're very, very hard to see. But what's underneath that, right? We end up stuck. We're bouncing between all these fears. What's underneath that are these two driving fears. If I can simplify all of that down for you, one is I'm not enough. Okay, and if I'm not enough, I'm not going to have the confidence to go do these things. I might fight it and all that, but it's sure not going to feel good. And the other one is the world isn't safe. And so later in the talk, I want to address those, and I want to inspire you guys to write new stories for yourself that combat those so that you don't carry these, so that I'm not enough doesn't exist for you, and so that the world feels loving and amazing instead.